Hello and welcome to the Newsome MMA podcast. Of course, we're back again to look over some fights ahead of this weekend's UFC Fight Island event. I'm your host, Kieran, Cobley, and tonight I'm joined by a good friend of mine, John Prentice. John, how you doing, man?
I'm very good, thank you. I'm very good. Thanks for having me back again. It's good to talk fights again, man.
Yeah, good, man. Now, of course, we can't go straight into this weekend's fights. We've got to talk about last week and what an amazing week it was for MMA. You had Bellator, Cage Warriors, and the UFC all running events. Cage Warriors, of course, did their trilogy events. What do you make of the fights?
You can. I don't know if you can see, but I'm wearing the Cage Warriors hoodie, man. It had to be represented after the three shows that they put on the other night, man. I mean, it was. I mean, obviously we had the disappointment of those fights that were cancelled due to COVID and teams and teammates, etc., testing positive. But all in all, I think it was a fantastic 3 nights of events. They put on superb fights. I can barely remember a fight where I was looking at thinking, I'm looking forward to the next one now because this one's not doing much. I mean, every single one was action packed. There was some great scraps in there. We saw some crazy knockouts, some crazy submissions, some 3-round wars. I mean, he pretty much had everything. And testament to the team, Graham Boylan and Ian Dean and the rest of the guys there at Cage Warriors because they put on one hell of a show. Um, Ran smoothly, as I say, with the fights dropping off. It didn't affect anything else. I mean, there was a worry at one point in the back of my mind that something terrible is going to happen. They're going to have to call off all the events because of the number of fighters and cornermen, etc., that are tested positive. But obviously shows that they've got all their restrictions and their things like that in place. And yeah, just awesome, man. I loved every minute of it. How can you not enjoy Thursday night, Friday night, and Saturday night mixed martial arts at a normal time in the UK as well? And it's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, it was fantastic for us as UK fans. Usually, used to stay up to 1, 2 o'clock in the morning just to stay up for the prelims of a UFC event. I mean, let's just go Thursday night. Thursday night, we had Cage Warriors 114, headlined by Samir Faidin, defending his title against Luke Shanks. Luke Shanks, man, he looks incredible, didn't he? 5 rounds of just pure domination. You could argue the last 4 rounds were 10-8 rounds as well in his favour. I mean, what did you make of this performance?
Yeah, it was superb because we spoke on the podcast last week about how we thought it might be a little bit too soon for Shanks getting this title fight. I think he was just like 6-1 at the time. Um, but man, he looked like a seasoned pro in there. He found the weakness, Fardeen's game, that wrestling, and he just kept going back to the well with it, man. He just went to it over and over again, and there was nothing. He couldn't be stopped. And I mean, his cardio looked superb. He didn't really look in any trouble at any point during that fight. And he looked like he'd had a lot more than 7 professional fights before that fight. And I was really impressed with him. Super impressive performance.
Yeah, I mean, where does he go next? I mean, the flyweight division, obviously, it's always a tough one to match up because there tends to be less guys in that division due to how averages work in heights and stuff for the UK. I mean, Sam Creasy, does he does he deserve another shot at the title? He's had 2, I believe, previously, and he's came up short. I mean, does he get a third try at the belt against Shanks, or do you see about maybe moving Shanks up to bantamweight if Cartwright gets a move?
I'm giving you 2 words, Kieran. I'm going Jake Hadley. I mean,
Of course, man. How can I
he got
forget?
a fantastic finish in his fight in his Cage Warriors debut on the same night in the co-main event. Um, Absolutely destroying Chad Chat with that head kick and putting him to sleep when he hit the canvas. And I think that's the fight to make. I think that'll be a superb um, contest between the two of them. I think it makes sense for both guys if neither of them get a call up to the UFC before that. And it's definitely going to be an entertaining scrap for sure. So I'm all for Luke Shanks against Jake Hadley next, please.
Yeah, of course, man. I don't know how I could forget about Jake Hadley's performance. That head kick KO, but actually did it even catch clean? He catch the guard as well. So moving on, Friday night, Cage Warriors 115. I mean, this is the card that sort of got ravaged by cancellations. We didn't get the Matthias Frederick fight, unfortunately. But however, we did have a 5-fight main card, no prelims, but all 5 fights ending in finishes. I mean, how incredible was that to see?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, it literally felt like we were watching the event for about 10 minutes. It went
Yeah.
that quickly. It was just finish after finish after finish. And yeah, there were some really fun fights. And despite the fact that we didn't get to see um, that Natalis Frederick fight that we were so looking forward to, I think the fights on that card certainly made up for it. Fantastic finishes and just all round hour and a half of entertainment.
Yeah, I mean, on that card, I saw two-team KF fighters. Ian Gary, who's an amazing prospect coming up. He put on a flawless performance. I mean, and then we also had James Webb. He got a submission victory over a veteran in Craig White. I mean, what's next for those? I mean, Ian's obviously only 4 fights into his pro career. James is obviously a former cage warriors champion. I mean, what do you see for those two guys next?
When it comes to Ian, we spoke last week about is he the next big star, and I think he certainly proved on Friday night that he's certainly on the trajectory to that kind of stardom. It was an absolutely fantastic performance against a guy in George McManus who's a really, really tough opponent. If people don't know this guy very well, George, I mean, he's superb wherever the fight goes, standing, goes to the mat. He's a legit submission specialist, and Ian just kind of made it look easy. He looked so calm in there. That finish, it was composed, and he didn't rush it or anything like that. I think he put something on Twitter. I think it was today actually that he was speaking to his nan about the finish and how his nan was praising how kind of calm and composed he was during the finishing sequence. How he didn't rush it or try to overextend and finish it too soon or anything like that. And Ian's nan summed it up perfectly. That's kind of how it fared and how it played out. And he's definitely on the right track for big things in his career. James Webb, another good win over a guy who's been in the UFC and been in there against some real tough guys, Neil Magny, Diego Sanchez. He looked really good. He put him away. He finished him. As we said, it would have been nice to see Natal's fight on that card, so maybe we could see the trilogy. For me, James Webb isn't far away at all from getting another middleweight title shot, whether it's against Natas or if Natas wins his next bout, which I assume will be in November when they're looking to get some events back on. If he moves on to the UFC from there, I imagine James Webb will be the first guy getting a call up to fight for the vacant middleweight belt. And I want to see the trilogy. The trilogy would be great.
Yeah, you mentioned Titus Frederick there. Obviously, his fight got cancelled due to a member of his team having tested positive for COVID. Unfortunately, that fight against Jim Richard, it sort of fell through, and I think we're all a little bit good about that. But having said that, does now, obviously, Caterers have announced they're planning a second trilogy event to come in November. If you're playing matchmaker here, if you're playing the role of Ian Dean, do you give Jamie Richardson that next fight, the fight against Titus Frederick? Obviously, it fell through. He was scheduled to win the title fight, and the circumstances that's out of his control meant he couldn't fight. Or do you say, you know what, this is a chance to put on a huge fight, a trilogy fight. We don't really get these in cage. I think this would be the first trilogy fight in cage history. Do you put James Webb, who's coming off I think it's a 4 fight win streak, and you do put him against the Titus Frederick? I mean, where's your head on that one?
It would be lovely to see the trilogy. I really would like to see that, but I think Graham and Ian Dean will be loyal to Jamie Richardson and ensure that he gets that fight in November, and then obviously see where it goes from there with regards to James Webb. As tempting as it may be to have that trilogy, like you said, I don't think it's happened in Cage Warriors before. The 2 fights before have been absolute bangers as well. So for every reason you'd want to put that trilogy fight on, but I think they'll stick with the original plan, and that'll be rescheduled for November, and then they'll take it from there.
Yeah, of course. We can't move on from Cage Warriors 115 without discussing Jack Cartwright. I mean, he put on another dominant display. This time he showed off his submission game and his wrestling game a little bit more than we've seen in previous fights. I mean, the first round submission we never get over Gerardo Fanny. I mean, what's next for him? Is it a UFC call-up, or do you give him another fight in Cage Warriors for this? I mean, he's still only 9-0 and he sort of has proven himself. There's questions surrounding him before going into the Cage Warriors tournament last year, and then still sorts of questions around this year. But have those been answered for you?
I think so. Yeah, I don't think you can deny this guy running the UFC now. He's put on fantastic display after fantastic display, starting with the 2 knockouts in one night. Then obviously we've seen him defend the belt now a couple of times. He's gone 5 rounds. He's shown that he's got a gas tank on him. He's showed his wrestling and submission credentials. I don't think there's really much else for him to prove until he goes on to the next level of the sport. And it was interesting. Brad and Daniel Strauss were talking about it on the commentary, that that Jack Allwright has been wrestling since a really young age as well, and he probably sees himself as a better wrestler than striker, and we've seen what he can do with his striking. So it's really good to see a fantastically well-rounded fighter coming out of the UK who can cause some real problems for some of the UFC vets in that division.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it looks like the writing's on the wall for him to go up. Another guy that looks like he could be making the move to UFC pretty soon, Mason Jones. I mean, he became the first Cage Warriors double champ since Conor McGregor on Saturday night in the Cage Warriors 116, defeated Adam Proctor for the vacant welterweight title. I mean, that performance was something else, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. He's got sledgehammers in those fists, man. We spoke about it last week, and I thought that Adam Proctor was actually going to win the fight. I thought that he was going to be the rangier fighter. I thought he was going to be able to, with Mason coming up in a weight class, I thought he'd be able to handle the power, having been the more natural welterweight. And man, Mason just absolutely blitzed him. He showed ridiculous power in those hands too.
Yeah, he definitely showed that wrestling background, didn't he? Boxing background, sorry.
Yeah, definitely. Like, he put him down, I think it was twice, 3 times maybe before the actual finish and the fight was called. And yeah, he's got to go to the UFC next. You don't become a double champ in Cage Warriors and then not get the call up to the UFC for your next fight. I'd be absolutely gobsmacked if we saw him compete in Cage Warriors for his next fight.
Yeah, he did offer a challenge actually to Sean Shelby and Dana White after his post-fight interview, saying, "Find me the biggest, deadliest lightweight you can find, and I'll come in and dismantle them." I mean, looking at the lightweight roster in the UFC at the minute, who do you think really suits that? Who do you think would be the optimal first fight for him in the UFC lightweight division? I mean, Jai Herbert didn't get an easy fight when he got called up. He got Francisco Trinaldo, and that was a great fight. Some of the other Cage Warriors fighters coming up, they've had tough debuts as well. Reese McGee obviously had Khamzat Chimaev. I mean, looking at the UFC lightweight rankings, who would you like to see him against?
It's a tough one, really, because, like you say, they've given Jai a tough debut fight. Reese McGee obviously came in on short notice in a tough fight, and I think when you've got a double champ like Mason, you don't want to kind of derail that hype straight away and give them someone inside the top 15 or anything like that, or just on the perimeters of the top 15. Lightweight's a ridiculously stacked division in the UFC, so I'm sure they can find plenty of guys to kind of, I don't want to say feed to Mason, because that's disrespectful to any guy in the UFC, because they're all there on merit. But yeah, for me personally, I don't think I want to see him go up against anyone really near to the top 15 yet. Maybe someone who's been around a little bit, who's seen a bit of the game, and he's kind of top 20-ish sort of guy, maybe, rather than him going up against a kind of untested newcomer, because I don't think that will really add much to his stock at this point. I think he's kind of got that. He'll be able to have that hype, and the UFC will be able to promote him massively with, like you say, with the last double champ being Conor McGregor. They'll be able to promote Mason Jones as the next double champ. Is he the next kind of star coming out of Cage Warriors? So I don't think giving him someone untested is going to be a good idea either. So yeah, with regards to a name, you know, my memory's terrible. I can't really think of anyone off the top of my head who I'd like to see go up against outside that top 15. But yeah, for me, I think it should be someone tried and tested in the UFC, but not someone who's going to just go in there and destroy him like a Chimaev did with Reese McGee kind of thing.
Yeah. Now, another guy that we've got to really mention, especially if we think Mason Jones could get a call up, he definitely deserves, is Jack Grant. He got a finish on Cage Warriors 116 as well with a first round KO, I believe. I mean, surely he gets a second shot at the Cage Warriors lightweight title, doesn't he? But in that division, who do you really match him against? Because Decky McAleenan, he lost to Paddy Pimblett. Joe McColgan obviously lost to Mason Jones. Paddy Pimblett's now out with an injury. He's posted on social media he's just had a surgery. I mean, what's next to Jack Grant? Obviously, he deserves a title shot, but do they really have anyone in there at the minute to put him up against for a title that deserves a title shot in that division?
Yeah, it's a tough one because like you say, Paddy's injured and he's the ideal kind of guy that you'd want in there. I don't know whether they'll wait to see it out and see obviously when Paddy can get back in there. It was a fantastic win for Jack. Really impressive display. Set up that finish beautifully. Really showed his credentials on the mat. But yeah, I think they'll wait to see how things play out with Paddy. See what happens there, how long he's going to be out for, and then kind of match things up from there.
Yeah. Now, of course, going straight, we've got to talk about Fight Island. Return of Fight Island last weekend, UFC 253, headlined by two fantastically matched title fights. The co-main event, you had Dominic Reyes taking on Jan Blachowicz to decide a new light heavyweight champion after John Jones has, sort of left the division behind to go chase Pasha's new heavyweight division. I mean, and Jan Blachowicz, he put on an incredible display. I mean, what did you make of that knockout? I mean, and what does this mean for European MMA as well to have another European champion?
Absolutely fantastic for European MMA. It was an absolutely fantastic performance. That Polish power is real, man. And to be honest, as I said last week when we spoke about the fights, I didn't think he'd get a finish. I think he was going to win this by decision. I did have Jan winning it. I saw a lot of people disrespecting Jan and on Twitter and things like that. And I don't know whether it's just the typical, dare I say, Europe versus US divide. US always seems to back their guys and think that they're just naturally better fighters because maybe they have more of a background with the wrestling and stuff in high school, college, and all that kind of thing. And usually you get the US fighters on bigger cards, so they're kind of more in your eye line and you notice them more. But yeah, Jan put on an absolute clinic. He looked so calm in there. He was not phased. I don't know whether there was a bit of overconfidence from Dominic Reyes, and he thought, I went push John Jones, one of the greatest of all time, to 5 rounds, and arguably could have taken a decision. This is going to be a lot easier because he kind of didn't get out of first gear for the entirety of the fight, and yeah, it's amazing to see how much Jan's come on. I mean, I think he lost 4 or 5 fights going back like 4 years or so.
Yeah, 2016, 2017, his record in the UFC was 2-4. Since then, it's gone 8-1. I mean, where was the turnaround for you? I mean, do you think something changed mentally with him? Do you think maybe it was a change in who he had around him in his camp? Or, because that's an amazing transformation to make in a pretty short time. I mean, what, 3.5, 4 years?
Absolutely crazy, and I think it's just I don't really know the ins and outs of his camp and whether he changed that up at all, but just the mentality as well. I think once you kind of get on that streak and you start winning fights, he's always been a tough guy to put away. And if you know that you can you're durable, you can tweak your game, and it's a lot easier to tweak your game, I think, if you know that you're not really very chinny, you're quite solid on the ground as well. You don't get submitted all the time when you get taken down. He's always been a well-rounded fighter, so he can just kind of improve on those levels. And once you get a bit of momentum and you get that confidence, you kind of get that feeling that you're not going to be beaten. And he looked like that when he walked to the octagon on Saturday night, and he certainly proved it.
Yeah, I mean, light heavyweight. Obviously, we spoke about it last week a little bit. The division's obviously still coming alive a bit. We've got Alex Rakic coming up the ranks. You've got Johnny Walker's back in the win column. Dominic Reyes is probably going to be a perennial contender if he gets another win back. You've got a couple of other guys coming up as well. I mean, but the only guy that I can think of that should be challenging for him for the title immediately is Thiago Santos. Thiago Santos. Obviously, he's out with an injury sustained against John Jones. I mean, do you keep Blachowicz waiting for that, or do you just see who's around and see if he'll take a fight?
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously Thiago Santos and Jan Blachowicz have fought before, and Thiago came out as victorious in that fight, and obviously there's Glover to share as well. He's kind of on a bit of a run at the moment, and they're obviously going to be fighting next month. So for me, naturally, the winner of that fight gets to fight Jan in Jan's first defence. I think that's like the first week of November they're going to be fighting, and I think Thiago Santos is going to come through that test, and I think it will be Thiago Santos against Jan Blachowicz too, as the next kind of step for Jan going forward.
Now, also, we've got to mention the sort of war of words, as you like it, between John Jones and Blachowicz on Twitter as well after his fight. I mean, John Jones is sort of giving it a bit of shit, and saying, making out that obviously he never actually lost the belt, he sort of just handed it over essentially. But do you think John Jones could be tempted to come back to light heavyweight to face Blachowicz? I mean, they've never fought before. Blachowicz obviously would like. It seems like he's interested in testing himself against the champ, the former champion now. I mean, is that a fight we could possibly see down the line, or is that just a sort of wishful thought for fans?
I think that's going to be a bit of a wishful thought for the time being. I think it'd be pretty pointless for John to relinquish the belt, say that he's moving up to heavyweight, and then as soon as Jan comes through the test against Dominic Reyes, go back and fight against Jan. I'd have liked to have seen John Jones just fight Jan in his next fight. Obviously, before he relinquished the belt, I think that would have made sense. Had he just defeated Dominic Reyes, Jan was next in line. I'd have liked to have seen him fight and beat Jan, and then kind of move on. But then it's kind of, when do you draw a line if you're John Jones and moving up to heavyweight? Because, like you say, then we've got people like Alexander Rakic coming up, and like the likes of Johnny Walker and things like that coming through. So there'll always be new up and comers to fight John Jones. But yeah, now he's relinquished the title, I think it'd be a bit silly to go back and fight Jan. I think he's going to have a run at heavyweight and see how he gets on there. And then if Jan's still hanging around in the light heavyweight division as the champion, and John decides he wants to go back down, then maybe we'll see it. But yeah, not for the foreseeable future, in my opinion.
Yeah. Now, it wasn't just Blachowicz that John Jones was getting into it with on Twitter. Of course, he got into it a bit with Israel Adesanya as well. I mean, Adesanya defended his title on Saturday night with a KO win. I mean, what are your thoughts on that win? I mean, did you expect it to come that easy for him?
No. As we spoke about last week, I did think Izzy was going to win. I thought he was going to be in the championship rounds. It kind of played out similar to how I thought it would, with him kind of moving, stick and move, piecing him up from the outside, and kind of avoiding the Costa flurries. But there wasn't really any Costa flurries. Costa kind of looked like a bit of a deer in the headlights kind of thing.
Yeah, he seemed very static, didn't he? They had a little exchange where they sort of changed stances as well. I mean, do you think that came down to a mentality thing? Because Costa in the build up of being sort of giving it large and got in Adesanya's face, the weigh-ins, and then something changed. He didn't look right in the cage, did he?
No, he didn't. No, we normally see him very aggressive, pressuring, and I saw a breakdown on Twitter a couple of days ago where he kind of showed some examples of where he did try to pressure, and Adesanya's footwork and movement were just too good, which is something, again, that we discussed with his fantastic kickboxing record, whether Paulo Costa will be able to actually get anywhere near him. And I think early on, after Adesanya landed several of those big leg kicks, I think Paulo Costa's leg was compromised, and I just kind of think he thought to himself then, this is going to be a tough night for me. And he didn't really throw any strikes after that. He had a little spell of throwing a lot of kicks, which we don't see as much as the boxing. We usually see the boxing from him as opposed to his kicks. And he kind of came out and threw a few kicks himself, and then that was kind of it. His output kind of stopped, and he just couldn't get, any time he went to get anywhere near punching range of Adesanya. Adesanya was either landing on him and moving out of the way, or just moving out of the way so he just wasn't there. And yeah, the stoppage came quicker than I thought it would. I thought it would be third or fourth round. Izzy made it look easy than I thought he would. I thought Costa would pressure him, land a few bombs. Izzy would weather the storm and finish it later on. But super impressive performance from Israel Adesanya.
Yeah. Now, we spoke about it a little bit last week and sort of debated it between ourselves, me, yourself, and Charlie, about could Adesanya be in the GOAT conversation. I mean, he surpassed 100 wins across combat sports with the win over Costa, 20 wins in MMA, God knows how many in kickboxing, and 5 wins in pro boxing as well. I mean, has your opinion? You said last week he thought he was maybe a few fights away still from the GOAT conversation. I mean, has that opinion changed a little bit? I've seen Adam Newsome, for example, our editor and sort of founder of the channel. he was saying that Adesanya really now should be within that conversation. I mean, what's your sort of take on that? I mean, does that fight change things for you?
I think it jumps him a little bit closer to the GOAT conversation than I had in my head last week when we spoke about it, but I still don't think yet you can fully put him in that GOAT conversation. Maybe one of the greatest combat sports athletes of all time because of, like you say, his kickboxing and boxing credentials as well. But with regards to mixed martial arts, I still think we need to see him go maybe win a belt at light heavyweight, or possibly get a couple more title defenses under his belt. That fight up against John Jones at light heavyweight would have been awesome. Maybe we'll still see. I don't know. Maybe John does kind of put the heavyweight run on hold and kind of just fights against Adesanya in a 5 rounds non-title light heavyweight fight.
Monetary-wise, that makes sense. That's a draw, isn't it? Especially when we get fans back in arenas.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's probably one of the, or if not the biggest fight that the UFC can put on, outside of maybe Conor against Khabib too. That's a fight that a lot of people want to see. A lot of people have kind of questioned how it would play out, and yeah, I mean, if John does kind of want to put that heavyweight run on hold for a little bit, I'd certainly be down for Izzy against John Jones at light heavyweight.
Yeah. Now,
and if he wins that, if Izzy does win that, like you say, he's certainly very, very close to the GOAT conversation then.
Yeah, of course. Now, of course, we've gone over last week's fights. We've got to look forward to this week's fight as well. I mean, what's your thought on this fight island card? So we discussed it in the chat earlier. We were sort of looking at it. We didn't think this was the strongest card. I mean, what are your thoughts on it as a whole? I mean, are there any fights you're particularly interested in seeing?
Yeah, for me, this fight card is on paper lacking kind of any real fireworks for me. It's not really getting me too excited. You don't really hear me say that very often because I'm a massive advocate of styles make fights and fighters make fights, even if they're not huge names, even if kind of you haven't got these massive draws. Some of these kind of lesser known fighters who are fighting for every paycheck, fighting to stay in the UFC, sometimes they put on some like unbelievable performances, which we could see again this weekend quite easily. I mean, there are some decent matchups on there, but just in terms of a relevance kind of position with the fights, there's nothing really there that I'm looking at and thinking like, wow, this does something big for this division. Outside of the main events, there's not really much that that really excites me. I'm looking forward to seeing Jurgen de Castro back in there because he's a heavyweight with big knockout power. That's always fun. There's a few. I'm actually looking forward to seeing Loma fight down against Jin Yun Frey down at strawweight. I think that'll be a good fight. I'm a big fan of Loma, and I'm looking forward to seeing what she can do. But outside of that, and maybe one or two other fights, it's not massively getting me hyped up for this weekend, and a late finish, probably a 4:30 in the morning finish again for us. But yeah, you never know what can happen. Sometimes we write these cards off, and they put on some absolutely fantastic displays, and it's finish after finish, entertainment non-stop. So we just have to wait and see.
Yeah, of course you're right. Obviously, styles make fights, fighters make fights, and I mean in the main event, I mean Holly Holm, you got Holly Holm versus Irene Aldana. I mean, Holm's always a fighter that brings out the best in her opponents. Fights are always entertaining. I mean, obviously the KO win over Ronda Rousey is what everyone sort of really knows her for. I mean, she had a fantastic fight against Germaine de Randamie for the featherweight title, which she should have won. I mean, de Randamie, there's a few illegal blows in there. I mean, but sort of looking at that fight, does that actually do anything for the bantamweight division? I mean, Holly Holm seems to be now maybe sort of getting towards twilight of career. Aldana, she doesn't seem to be doing that much in the division. I mean, does it scream number one contender fight for you, or is it just a sort of here's a UFC saying here's a fight, we're going to put it on Fight Island to make it a bit bigger than it actually is?
For me, I think Aldana is the one who can come out of this really well. I think if she beats Holly Holm, she's got a win over a former champion, a win over someone who's fought for countless amounts of titles. and I think it's basically this fight is set up for her. I mean, Holly Holm, do we really want to see her in another title fight this soon? Obviously, she got that decision win against Raquel Pennington in the last fight, which wasn't very entertaining, just a grinding affair up against the fence. And the fight prior to that, she was convincingly beat by Amanda Nunes via knockout in the first round. So I don't think I'd like to see her go back in and fight for a title anytime soon. But Aldana, she got that fantastic win over Ketlen Vieira in her last fight. She put her away with that massive left hook in the first round, and Vieira, we've only just seen her come back this past weekend from that fight. And I think if Aldana can really push the pace here, I think Holly Holm will try and do what she usually does: fight smart on the outside, use the kicks, grind it up against the fence when she can, and just look to score some points and get the win that way. But Aldana, she comes out aggressive and wild. We've seen her in some good fights. She can that Lucy Pudilova fight really stands out as well. She's got finishing ability as well. We saw against Betchka with the armbar, as I mentioned, Ketlen Vieira. I think Aldana needs to really push the pace in this fight and get an impressive win, and I think she could be the next in line to fight for the belt. Holly Holm wins. I don't think she will get that title fight next. I think this will just be another win in the win column for the good career of Holly Holm.
Yeah, I mean, sort of looking at the records here, Irene Aldana, I mean, she's definitely a fight that Holm should be. It's definitely not going to be an easy fight for Holm. I mean, 9 finishes, 6 by KO, 3 by submission. I mean, but can Holm sort of survive this test? I mean, is this a win for Holm, or is it Aldana gets a notable scalp on a record?
I'm actually picking Aldana in this fight. I think Holly Holm is kind of dropping off the pace a bit now. She's like you say, she's coming to the twilight of her career. She's 38 years old, I think now, and you can kind of tell she's slowing down a bit. Her real strength used to be that speed of the kicks, the counter striking. But when you kind of start to slow down a bit, your timing sort of kind of goes on those counter strikes. I mean, she's by no means a poor or even an average fighter anymore. She's still a very good fighter in this division, as we saw beating Raquel Pennington in the last fight. But as I say, I think Aldana is going to really push the pace. I think she's kind of 32 years old. She's kind of one of these that you'll be looking to fight for the title in the next few years. I don't like to use MMA maths because obviously Aldana lost to Raquel Pennington last year by split decision, and Holly Holm just beat Pennington in the last fight at the start of this year. I don't like to use the MMA math rule and say that, well, Holm beat Pennington beat Aldana, so it makes sense that Holm beats Aldana. I don't play with that game, and yeah, I think Aldana's going to win this fight. I think it's going to be another close fight. Whenever you fight Holly Holm, it's going to be close because of her style. We saw that in the Holm against Germaine de Randamie fight, which Holm could quite easily have won. But yeah, I'm going with Aldana to be the more aggressive fighter, land the heavier strikes, and I think she's going to take a decision.
Yeah, interesting thought there. In person, I was sort of leaning towards Holm, but again, it's not a fight where I could convincingly pick a winner. But speaking for talk about one former women's bantamweight champion going to a former women's featherweight champion, Germaine de Randamie, she's back. She's looking to bounce back from that loss to Amanda Nunes. I mean, what do you make of this fight? I mean, this could potentially be the fight of the night, surely, against Pena.
Yeah, I think this could be a good fight. I'm a big fan of Germaine de Randamie. I do like the Iron Lady. She obviously got a very good background in striking, and that's where she kind of wants her fights to play out. In the Nunes loss, we saw that she just got taken down too often and couldn't stop the takedowns and kind of got sustained. I think that'll be the kind of game plan for Pena as well. I think she'll want to get this fight to the mat if she can, because nobody really wants to stand and strike with Germaine de Randamie. My worry for Julianna Pena is just the size of Germaine de Randamie. When you look at the fighters that Pena's fought previously, Nico Montagna, Valentina Shevchenko,
Yeah, so
these two,
flyweight fighters, yeah. Whereas Randamie's
Valentina,
heavier,
obviously,
normally.
yeah, those two fights are a bantamweight, but they're kind of, like you say, they're flyweight fighters, and Germaine is a big bantamweight. She's kind of similar to Kat Zingano, actually, who Pena beat back at UFC 200, but Kat Zingano at that time is the fighter that she used to be, and I think this is going to be tough for Pena. I think that Germaine de Randamie is going to be too big for her. I think her striking is going to be too good. As long as she can keep this standing, I think she's going to piece up Julianna Pena, and I actually think this is going to go very similarly to the Aspen Ladd fight. I think Aspen Ladd, there was a lot of hype behind her when she fought Germaine de Randamie, and we knew how dangerous she was when she got the fight to the mat. But you've got to get the fight to the mat in the first place. You don't want to stand and strike with de Randamie. That's why Nunes took the fight to the mat all the time whenever she could. Yeah, for me, I think Germaine de Randamie is going to win this fight.
Yeah, I mean, could Pena actually get this fight to the ground? I mean, Aspen Ladd, we knew going in her game plan into that fight against de Randamie was always going to be get the fight to the mat, and she was unable to do it. She got stopped in very early. But we've also seen that some fighters have managed to get de Randamie down to the mat. Amanda Nunes, basically that was her whole game plan. I mean, could Pena do that? Is an upset on the cards potentially?
I don't think she. I mean, she might be able to. Maybe once, twice throughout the fight, but Germaine de Randamie can get back to her feet. We have seen that before. She does get taken down. But I just think that Amanda Nunes is a really good wrestler, a really legit black belt on the mat, and I don't think Pena's on her level when it comes to either. I don't think she's going to be able to have the kind of takedown success that Nunes did to be able to kind of grind out this fight, and I don't think she's going to outstrike de Randamie and win it that way. So for me, I can't see a path to victory for Pena in this fight.
Okay, man. Now talk about one of your favourite fighters of all time. One of mine is also about Carlos Condit. He's back from a two-year layoff. He's taking on Court McGee, a former Tough alumni. I mean, is this surprising to you that Condit's come back? I mean, after such a lengthy layoff, and also the fact he's coming back off a 5-week five-fight skid where he lost 3 of those fights by submission.
Yeah, I'm surprised that he's back again. I think this really will be his last fight if we see him defeated. The thing that worries me in his last few fights, Neil Magny, Alex Cowboy Oliveira, and Michael Chiesa, is just the fact that it's that mental side of the game. He kind of just doesn't look like he wants to be there anymore, and there is a blueprint for how you beat Carlos Condit. You can take him down, you can hold him down. If he gets back up, you can take him down again. He's one of those fighters that doesn't really seem to have evolved in regards to the wrestling aspect of mixed martial arts. He's just been too easy to take down in those defeats, and I don't know if Court McGee's going to try and do that. Court McGee's a tough guy. He likes to stand and bang. He's a very tough guy to put away, actually. When you look, he's lost 4 of his last 5. Condit has lost 5 of his last 5. But those Court McGee losses, none of them have come. None of those 4 out of the 5 have come by stoppage. His last stoppage loss was to Ponzinibbio back in 2016. There's absolutely no shame in getting finished by Pons. He's a dangerous guy, and that's actually his only loss while finish at his record. And I think this is going to be a stand-up battle, which suits Condit. He can show off his kickboxing. He's got really good strikes. He's very crisp. I don't really think he's got that knockout power. He's kind of an accumulation guy. We saw that against Thiago Alves. We saw that against Martin Kampmann in his last win before that. But I think Court McGee's going to win it, man. I really like Carlos Condit. I always have done. He's a really entertaining fighter to watch, especially when he's involved in those stand-up scraps. But yeah, I think I think his career is pretty much done. I'm surprised that he did come back. So I think he did briefly announce his retirement after that last loss. So I'm surprised that he's come back again. But yeah, I think Court McGee he's just going to be too tough. And I think Court McGee's going to take a decision.
Yeah, I mean, sort of looking at Condit's losses. I mean, none of them have come against guys that weren't particularly, well, all the guys he lost against are really good top contenders. I mean, I'm just looking at some of his losses. George St. Pierre back in 2012, Johnny Hendricks in 2013, Tyron Woodley 2014, Robbie Lawler 2016, Demi Meyer in 2016, Neil Magny 2017, Oliveira in 2018, and Chiesa in 2018 as well. I mean, should fans take any sort of refuge from that? Because obviously they're sort of a step above McGee and sort of, I don't know how to put this politely, but talent-wise, they seem to be the next step up. Couldn't fans take some sort of refuge in that and maybe think, oh well, maybe this could be a way for Carlos to walk into the sunset with a win under his belt because he's not against guys of that guys of such caliber. He's against a guy that's he's a tough alumni, but he's not exactly a former contender or a former title challenger or former title holder or a future title holder potentially.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely a good matchup for Condit in that sense. I think it is a step down from the level of competition that he's been fighting against previously. Like you say, he's kind of faced a row of killers, one after the other.
Which who's who of the welterweight division, really, isn't it?
Yeah, which is pretty brutal for him. Like you say, Johnny Hendricks, GSP, Nick Diaz, Tyron Woodley, Thiago Alves, Robbie Lawler, Damian Maia. All these guys are kind of the guys that have always been in and around the top of the division. Obviously, over the last few years, he's been fighting still tough guys. I mean, Michael Chiesa's always been a top 15 kind of guy. Alex Oliveira's always a tough opponent to go up against. Court McGee is like you say, with the greatest respect, he's a step down from those. But I mean, Court McGee's fought some tough guys on the other side of things, like Sean Brady in his last fight. Sean Brady's a really good up and coming fighter, and he went to a decision and toughed it out against him and went to a decision. Ponzinibbio is another guy who people are talking about when he comes back. If he gets a couple of wins, he'll be fighting for a belt. And we forget that many moons ago he actually holds a win over Robert Whittaker as well by decision back a long time ago in 2013. And Whittaker's evolved massively since then. But it's by no means a gimme fight for McGee, much like it isn't a gimme fight for Carlos Condit. I think it is kind of one of those fights for one of these two guys who have been around for a long time. It's winnable for both of them. For me, it's a straight up 50-50 between these two guys. If Condit was fighting someone more of a wrestler style, I wouldn't favour Condit to win, but yeah, this is pretty even. I just think Court McGee's going to slightly edge it over Condit just because of his toughness, his durability. I mean, but it is a real toss-up between the two of them, and it's definitely a fight that Carlos Condit can win, especially if it stays standing and he can keep it in striking range. He's definitely got the arsenal to beat Court McGee in that sense. So yeah, Carlos Condit could easily come out of this with a win, and I hope he retires, win or lose, after this weekend.
Yeah, now sort of going off again, coming again, going off talking about a guy that's so very experienced in the UFC and looks like he'd be walking in sunset. To a guy that's making his UFC debut and a British guy as well. Always exciting to see for British fans. Cameron Else makes his octagon debut in the UFC. He takes on Kyler Phillips. He takes on this fighter show. I know he's only accepted it last week, apparently. I mean, how excited are you to see another British guy in the UFC, and how much do you know about Cameron?
To be honest, despite the fact that he's British, I haven't actually watched too many of his fights live. I've watched a bit of stuff here and there. Obviously, he trains out at Jackson Wink, so he's training with some really good guys. He's got some good wins on his record. He's a finisher. If you just look at all of his fights, his last 6 fights, all been wins via finish, guillotine choke in the first round, knockout in the first round, knockout in the first round, referee stoppage in the first round, rear naked choke in the first round, knockout in the first round after 14 seconds. Then obviously he lost his fight prior to that, and then beat Dylan Duke, who's a really tough guy, by knockout in the first round. He's got a win over Paddy Pimblett, albeit that was back in 2013 when Paddy was probably about 12 years old. But yeah, this guy's a finisher, man. If he gets a chance, if he smells blood, he will go in for the kill. So this is going to be an interesting debut, an interesting fight for Kyler Phillips to go up against Cameron Else. My only worry is the level of competition that Cameron Else has fought. If you look at the guys that he's fought against, Cameron Else is 10-4. Brad Evans was his last win. His last fight, Brad Evans was 3-14 at the time. Mark Stevens, the fight before that, he was 0-1. Aidan James, 4-0. Tom Major making his debut. These guys.
Thomas Turgeman was 1-1. Jordan Ramshaw making his debut as well.
Exactly. There's not many guys. I mean, the Dylan Tuke fight was one that I was impressed with. Dylan Tuke was 3-0 at the time, and the Nuke has got some had a bit of hype behind him at the time. And then, like you say, Aidan James as well. He's a well-known name over this side of the pond, and he was unbeaten at the time at 4-0. And obviously, you have to go back to Paddy Pimblett, who was 4-0 at the time as well when those two fought back in 2013. But it's just that level of competition, and Kyler Phillips has been in there with some really tough guys. He's win over Gabriel Silva. Gabriel Silva's a very tough guy. He's fought in LFA, who always put on good shows. They've got some good matchmakers over there. He's fought in the Ultimate Fighter. Obviously, lost to Brad Katona. Brad Katona's a good guy who had 3 fights in the UFC. He's fought on Dana White's Contender Series as well. And obviously, we know that the guys who go on the Contender Series are always pretty decent up and comers. So I think when you look at the records side by side, Kyler Phillips has come up against the tougher opponents. I think Kyler Phillips is going to win this fight. But don't rule Cameron Else out, man. Like I say, he's a finisher. If he smells blood, he can finish on the mat. He's got power. He's got good kicks. I think he's got a bit of a Taekwondo background as well, which obviously helps him in regards to that kicking game. And yeah, it's going to be an interesting one to kind of really see what Cameron Else's level is, because I think he's kind of put out on his social media a few times that he's got the call up to the UFC, and it's never really materialised. But here he is now. We're going to see him step in there, and I'm looking forward to it. But I do think Kyler Phillips is going to edge this fight.
Yeah, I mean, you spoke there about his record. Obviously, it's not the greatest. I mean, just looking at his last 6 fights, of course, he wins, but his opponents have got 1, 5, 8 wins between them, and 14, 15, 16 losses between them. I mean, that's obviously not the sort of record you'd expect a fighter to get. A joint record of fighters you expect a guy to fight and then get close to the UFC. You mentioned the Paddy Pimblett fight as well. Paddy Pimblett at the time was only 18 years old. He was fighting a bantamweight. He's now a lightweight. So I actually rewatched that fight before just between the gap between Cage Warriors and Cage Warriors finishing on Saturday and UFC 253 starting. And Paddy didn't look like the Paddy we know and love today. He was a lot smaller. I don't know if Paddy's got a massive growth spurt or something in there, but he looks skinny. He looked particularly short as well, I thought. I mean, can fans really look into records though? I mean, obviously we've sort of gone in on this, but Cameron's got a reputation of being a guy that spoils things. He's fought in Bellator before. He won a fight he probably wasn't supposed to win. I think Bellator had got ambitions for the guy who's taking on. Aidan James at Brave, that was a Brave show they did in the UK, and Aidan James was apparently promised if he beat Cameron, he was going to get a bantamweight title shot. I mean, is he capable of the upset again? I mean, he trains with a fantastic team. You mentioned Jackson Wink when he was out in the US. While he's in the UK, you mentioned his Taekwondo background. He trains with Jermaine Hemmings and the Master Wolf Taekwondo Academy down in Margate. I mean, is Cameron Else a guy that, people should be looking at underdog money, thinking, you know what, he's worth a couple of quid.
Absolutely. Like you say, he's a spoiler, and I'm very much of the belief, like you said, that you can kind of only beat the people that are put in front of you. And when he has come up against guys like Aidan James, like Paddy, like Dylan Tuke, these guys are kind of the ones that people are talking about and saying these guys are going to go on to good things. Obviously, we've seen that with Paddy and go on to good things, but he's come out on top and he's won. It's just my worry when he goes against. When he does seem to go against those more experienced guys, those guys with a winning record against some tough fighters, that he has been unsuccessful. Ed Arthur, he obviously lost in the first round. Ed Arthur has always been a good fighter on the scene over here in Europe. He lost twice to Spencer Hewitt, who was 9-3 and 10-7 at the time, the winning record. And then Damo Whedon, back in Cage Warriors 85, was 9-7 at the time. So whenever he seems to have fought guys with a winning record, he has lost. And especially that Ed Arthur fight, that's against a guy who's experienced, tough guy, who I kind of see as like the Kyler Phillips type of guy. He's come out unsuccessful, but you definitely can't rule Cameron else out, because he is dangerous. He's dangerous wherever the fight goes. He's got finishing power. He is a spoiler, like you say, and yeah, definitely at underdog money. He's definitely worth having a few quid on, because he can spoil the party for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we've also got to talk about it's another British bantamweight going into that division. I mean, that's bantamweight in the UFC is quickly becoming a division where the British are invading and they're making a scene. I mean, John Phillips is ranked, Jack Shaw and Nathaniel Wood. I mean, if we don't get UFC London next year, 2022, we definitely need to see that fight in a London venue. Or if UFC decide to go Cardiff, we need to see that fight, and then Cameron coming in. I mean, how exciting is that for you to see a division that's suddenly sort of slowly becoming a division that's being filled with British talent and guys that we've seen come up on the regional scene over here?
Yeah, it's fantastic. I think we've got some really good lighter weight fighters over here in the UK, and we've seen that now as they migrate over to the UFC, as the guys that you mentioned, Nathaniel and Jack and people like that. These are really good fighters who can fight against some of the top guys in the UFC. One thing in common is they all train at good teams. Obviously, we've got Brad Pickett, who was a real legend of the lighter weight classes for British fighters, and he kind of flew the flag for a long time for the lighter British fighters against the American guys over in WEC and then the UFC, and he's now training guys like Nathaniel and another guy, Chris Meyer, who trains at Renegade now. He spent a lot of time training with Brad Pickett. He's another guy who could quite easily make it to the UFC. He just so happens that he decides to pursue other things outside of fighting. Sometimes doesn't seem to be the number one thing for him. He's very good at it, as we saw in his last fight against Donovan Desmay, where he just was mauled him for 3 rounds on the mat. He's another guy who could go over to the UFC, in my opinion, and compete in that bantamweight division. And it's fantastic to see all these guys from the UK doing so well, especially in one specific weight class, because it shows that obviously we're doing something right with the lighter weight classes over here.
Yeah. So the last question I really want to ask you, John, is you just spoke about there a little bit about bantamweight becoming a division that's sort of solely filling up British guys like Brett Johns, Jack Shaw, Nathaniel Wood, now Cameron coming in as well. And there seems to be a few more in the pipeline. Jack Cartwright, but it's not too long before he comes in as well.
Yeah.
is bantamweight the division where we have the best hopes of seeing the next British UFC champion?
Possibly, yeah. I obviously maybe slight bias, but obviously in my opinion, the next British champion is going to be Leon Edwards at welterweight. Not anyone who knows me probably won't be surprised.
He's got to get a match first. No one wants to fight him, innit, man?
Well, absolutely, yeah. But outside of that, definitely, I think so. Yeah, when you look at Nathaniel Wood, Brett Johns, Jack Shaw, Jack Cartwright, when he comes, I think Jack Cartwright is going to really tear up.
He looks like he's going to make a splash, doesn't he?
Oh, definitely, because he's got knockout power. He's got a good wrestling background. I think did Brad Wharton say that he was going out to Russia at like 10 to
wrestling tournaments stuff. Of course, we need to mention Brad Wharton's classic line on commentary with Jack's last fight. I mean, when Freddy Krueger has nightmares, he's dreaming of Jack Cartwright. I mean, if that doesn't sum up Jack Cartwright and why you should be aware of him, I don't think anything else we say will do injustice.
Absolutely, yeah. I think he will be the guy that will really shoot up the rankings quickly, because he's of how well-rounded he is, and the fact that he's got that really solid wrestling background, he's got knockout power, he's got everything you need. He's marketable, so the UFC will want to push him as well. And it's exciting times, man. Really exciting times.
Yeah, you might, if he gets a decent haircut, it'll be the complete package. Of course, unfortunately, John, that's all we've got time for tonight. But before we wrap up, is anyone you want to give a shout out to?
Just as always, man. Just hit me up on Twitter at MMA. Always enjoy talking fights with everyone. Obviously, we had that very brief and worrying moment last week after the podcast where I was suspended from Twitter. The Twitter powers obviously didn't want to hear from me anymore, but I'm back at MMA. And yeah, man, I just love talking fights with all you guys. So just hit me up on there.
Yeah, cheers for your time. Of course, you can follow me at Cobley Reporting and Newsome or Newsome MMA on Twitter as well. Make sure if you like the podcast, you like and subscribe to the channel and give it a share so we can get more and more people involved in this conversation. Of course, that's what we've got time for this evening, but we'll catch you next week on next week's episode.